Hi, I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video. And the topic of this video will be on games, and so the content and the nature of this video will be one explaining the relation between playing games for children and their social, moral, and ethical development, and per se, and what this sort of what we're doing right now in Western culture, and why we may be having some serious problems in the future. So kids. So I suppose first it would be interesting, or at least an interesting part of entry, to think of society as a game. Really, it's a you get a group of people together and you stick them under a set of rules, and they have to play it out in order to they have to abide by these rules and play within these rules and frameworks that were really arbitrarily selected over time. And I say arbitrarily, but they've been arbitrarily selected but substantiated in their validity by way of history. That's basically history and tradition. So they've been arbitrarily selected over time. People are put under these things, and they get the rewards based on how well they play with the rules and maneuver through the rules. So society, in a lot of ways, is a game. When I was writing a paper on civil unrest, I used this game analogy and said basically you get civil unrest when the rules of the game are set up in such a way that the feedback mechanisms aren't calibrated right. There's not enough of the feedback mechanisms in games. I suppose if you're a game programmer, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're not a game programmer, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But I'll just put it like this. So Monopoly is a good example, especially because we're talking about a capitalistic society. In Monopoly, the board is set up with four different quadrants, four different boulevards. If you made the arrow point to the left of the board versus to the right of the board, there would be a really, really damp and retardant feedback mechanism in the game, meaning that it would be really easy for somebody to get the lead very quickly and very hard for others to catch up in respect. So you would make a great deal of disparity very quickly, and this degree of disparity would disrupt the entire flow of the game, and most people would quit. So in all games, you need a feedback mechanism where the game gets harder as you get more assets per se. The game should get harder in degree as you climb up the game ladder. But you get social unrest when the rules of the game are skewed to an extent where it retards the feedback mechanism, and there's just not enough level of difficulty and retardant in it for there just to be equimonious play. It's not saying that the rich shouldn't become rich and the poor shouldn't be poor, but it's saying that the rich and the poor need to both be able to play per se, because if you want the feedback mechanism to work in both the manners. If you're rich, it retards the game, your progress a little, it hampers it, or at least gives you more barriers to overcome. Sort of it gives you more barriers to overcome rather than just letting you run buckshot, because then nobody will be able to catch up. And for the poor, the game should be easier per se, because they just can't keep up per se with the output of the rich. You want there to be a trail. It's like if you're running against Usain Bolt. Yeah, he's gonna beat you by quite a substantial distance, but you at least want to be able to finish the race. It'd be like Usain Bolt running against geriatrics. You don't want that to happen with very old people. The old people may not even finish the race. They may quit. It's like they don't have a bat's chance in hell to even be participants in the race. You don't want everybody to win. Everybody shouldn't win. Everybody's not going to win, but you want everybody to be able to at least to be a participant and feel engaged in their participation of the game. So that's what I wrote in this paper when I was talking about civil unrest, because I'm not somebody who's like a moralist or whatever. But anyways, so you think of society like a game. So this is why I think this is the connection I'm making between children and playing and society and how games are structured. So Society is a game, right? It's a very, very big, complicated game, but it's a game nonetheless. And it's a game you get the rules for by just living life to a certain extent within the society. You are embedded in the culture, and through osmosis, really, an interaction, you're taught to be a cog or a piece in the culture. I don't like to use the word cog necessarily because that seems so depersonalized for most people, but it's just as Homo sapiens, we've chosen to play this game per se of civility, and it's a game, and you're a piece in the system. There's a matrix, but the matrix is there not because reality is any way, but because culture is a certain way, and that's just like an evolutionary strategy. So there is a matrix. You're in the matrix. You're not going to get out of the matrix. There's no such thing as a red or a blue pill. I mean, they're both the same damn pill. You're just going to be looking at the thing from different angles per se. But anyways, it's just that, at least this is what I think. Anyways, it's just a really complicated, sophisticated game that you got to play in. You're going to learn the rules to. But how do you get prepared to actually interject yourself into that game? Is it through culturation and inundation in the educational environment, or is it through playing? And this is where the rub is. Kids, I mean, it doesn't matter what culture they're in. Well, I can't say emphatically it doesn't matter what culture they're in, but there's been a great deal of research to show that kids primarily pick up moral tenets and ethical behaviors from playing games. Kids learn primarily how to think, how to play, and how to interact with others by playing with them. That's why you can have kids, and you don't have to. There's a play circuit in the brain for people in general. People like to play, and people need to play. Playing is a way for us to learn things, and it seems to be a mechanism, just a natural mechanism in which we learn ethical behavior, moral behavior, and just being able to approximate ourselves in a dominance hierarchy without getting smushed per se. It's just where you learn rules. You learn the rules of social engagement through playing games. Now, that's how kids just build up so many faculties and sort of boot themselves up. There's a really good analogy to get what I'm saying. It's so boot themselves up in terms of a computer, and if you are dealing with a computer, it comes with a set of base operations that it uses. Then, as it boots itself up, it builds operations on top of the strata of the extant operations, the fundamental operations. It builds a little more complex network out of those, and then it builds a little more complex network out of those, and it builds a little more complex network out of those until it has a very, very complex, you have a very complex working mechanism, but it starts with these lower ordered base operational systems that it uses, the schema in a sense, and it assimilates information and constructs and extrapolates and connects different things based off of these base schemas, and you get the functioning unit that you have. It's the same thing with a kid. They come equipped with certain things. Babies, well, anybody knows that you can touch the side of a baby's mouth and they'll, well, maybe not anybody knows, but anybody's got children. Well, I'll turn anything into an experimental object. Maybe you don't want to turn your child into an experimental object, but the perks of being an INTP. But if you touch the side of a baby's mouth, they'll naturally start moving their head around and trying to get their lips around whatever is touching the side of their cheek, because they have this, their brain is myelinated and wired to suck things, because lo and behold, that's how they're going to feed. And then when you put the baby to the mother's breast, that's their first social interaction, because they're sort of learning that there's some rules in game. There's a game network or setup. That's just a useful analogy. There's a game set up to whereas I have to get my head to this sort of distance, and it would help me to look her in the eyes as she's looking me in the eyes, because it's helping us bond, but it's also getting, and hopefully I'm not it's totally depersonalizing things for people, but this is a way to look at things, to understand things, but this is a way for us to bond, because she's bonded with me. It's not like the baby's consciously thinking about it, but they're hardwired to do these things, because it's like if I look at her while she's feeding me, she's bonding with me, it's releasing oxytocin in her brain, so she's going to continue to feed me. I cannot bite her, because it's going to learn if I bite, it's not like baby have teeth, but the bite's going to surprise the mother and the woman, and she's going to jerk back, and the baby's going to be surprised and may panic a little and doesn't like that. So just over time, it's going to be taught the rules to the game by engagement. So kids, most adults, it's just like adults learn by engagement, but it's just you don't have to do it as much as you get older because you did it so much when you were a child. But kids, they learn by playing and messing with things. Through engagement is by a way in which they learn. Now, in schools, we teach children through rote mechanisms and inundation. We just try to anesthetize and brainwash them to some extent, because that's what it is to some extent. And not to be totally pessimistic about schools, but the ideas in which we administer education in a classroom setting, sort of the structure we have, come from Pavlovian schools of thought, insofar as that if you want to teach anything, you expose it to it over and over. You expose the individual to it over and over again over time, and then if they show behavior that is resistant or retardant to change, you subject them through a tremendous amount of stress to the point where they break, to where the systems of behaviors will rewrite themselves. You ever notice how discipline structures are set up in schools? It's very freaking... Just pay attention to schools for a second, and it's really frightening in some respects how dehumanized they are, and the experimental landscape that they're getting the base structure for how they do things is it's horrible in some respects. It's almost like being in a concentration camp or an internment camp or being interrogated. They all have this sort of analogous structures insofar as what it means to be taught. That's if you're a bad kid. Not if you're a good kid, I guess. Like, so some kids aren't gonna. But anyway, I'm moving on. But anyways, that's how we are teaching kids in that structure with the blank slate model. You pour knowledge and information into them, and that's how you get them to learn. And we don't see that, one, that's not how kids learn, and we don't get, two, you're totally obstructing their ethical and their moral development. And I have Jean Piaget and Montessori and other thinkers to credit for even actually first stepping and embarking upon these ideas, because the child, it boots itself up. So the child is booting up its structures on how to interact with people, primarily in play in the game, particularly the social game, by way of exploratory, just exploratory play with other kids. It's playing with other kids, because school is just a place you go. School is a place you send your kids to learn from other kids. They don't really learn from their teachers, if parents haven't already noticed. But schools, when you get a bunch of kids together, the only thing that they're doing is playing and building their social, moral, and ethical structures out of their interaction with one another. That's why you can send a kid to school and they come back home and they're not the same person. And I know parents know this, but maybe they just don't know the science, sort of this psychological literature that's out there to explain it. But kids make themselves up. At least they make their social and their moral contracts through play. That's what they do. That's how they learn. So you take play away from kids, which is what they're doing in schools, and you have a total mega catastrophe. Because the game, society is a game. It's something that people have to learn to play. I swear to everything. It's like people who are too cruel and people who are too soft. They didn't play enough as children, I don't think. Just because you learn how to fit yourself. I mean, I'm going to talk about people as creatures in their creatureliness, but animals learn how to fit in a dominance hierarchy from roughhousing and from sort of tea parties. We can call them that. You can put play into sort of three camps: the imitation camp, the roughhouse camp, and the abstraction camp. So kids, most animals do the imitation camp and the roughhousing camp. Chimps, It's not monkey see, monkey do, but it's close enough, and I hate using that expression, but it's a low order form of watching and working and bumping into different things in the environment with one another. So they'll throw some rocks around and they'll mess with sticks in a certain way, and they'll discover things and do things with the sticks and sort of play with the rocks and do whatever, and they make culture and they make rudimentary tools and different things out of that, different things like that through playing. And then obviously they get together and they hit each other and rummage around and things like that. So these are the sort of, in all most mammals, I should say. I don't know if insects play. I haven't looked at the play dynamic of insects. Maybe I should. But actually I see if insects play. But most mammals play. That's how they learn. People, we play with these under the imitation camp and the roughhousing camp. One could say that those are arbitrary quadrants, because, I mean, like, they can all fit together in a sense, because we're just kind of abstracting everything as people. Culture is a giant, big abstraction to begin with. But it's like, and then the abstraction camp. So the imitation camp, kids, they play house. And it's so interesting that they play house. And it's like, nobody asks, like, well, maybe some people ask. I think Piaget asked, Jordan B. Peterson asked, like, a lot of researchers, psychological researchers ask, what are they doing when they're playing house, per se? But, like, kids, they watch parents, and through implicit learning means, they sort of abstract the procedural models of behavior that they have to undertake to be mother or father, which I think is just really interesting. And they do it with the dog too. It's like, it's sort of where we start to learn, or in some ways play with our ability to abstract things and act out rituals and patterns in a way. It's like we learn to dress ourselves in things that we aren't, given our cultural identities. It's part of the way we learn to assimilate to culture. It's weird. It's something that people do. That's why when people want to tell me people aren't animals, I'm just like, you're naive. But it's something that people do. And this helps us fit into culture. It helps us fit into culture better, because when you go into your job, if you played house as a kid, you go into your job and you essentially do the same thing. Nobody tells you how to do your job. You sit at the computer. Well, maybe it depends on what job you have. You sit at the computer and it gives you, or you go through your little training. You do whatever your dumb employer thinks that is going to teach you to be a good employee, and you go through all that stuff, and you still don't know how to do your freaking job. And you try to do your job without having the knowledge of knowing how to do your freaking job, and you make mistakes, so you get in trouble for not knowing how to do your freaking job. But what you then start doing is just watching other people. Even if you don't consciously realize you're doing this, you just watch other people and you extract the procedures that they do. You copy them, you map them and assimilate them onto yourself. But you kind of you practice that and get to know that and actually really master that thing as playing house as a kid. And playing Tea Party. Like, holy crap, kids playing Tea Party has a big deal to do with their ability to be sort of empathetic. Boys should learn how to play Tea Party. And little boys don't really want to play Tea Party, but they'll do it if there's enough treats involved. You know, you give them a good incentive. That's not going to be their first go-to, but little boys will play Tea Party, so it's not just girls or boys, but just some sort of learning how to dine, per se. So the act of eating is just so really interesting if you're a psychologist, because it's like, do you share your food? How well do you share your food? Who do you share your food with? Essentially, what do you do with your resources? Do you hoard them? And as you're playing Tea Party, the other kids will not play with you if you hoard your resources. If you're not up to sharing those cookies, man, if you're not passing those M&Ms, you're not playing Tea Party with us anymore. You can bring the Starburst, but if you don't share those Starbursts, man, you ain't coming back to this get-together. And us being social creatures, we want to go back to the get-together. We want to do the play again. So we share the Starburst, we share the M&Ms, we share the Skittles. But then we also learn to sort of ration out, okay, what's reasonable for me to share and what's reasonable for me to withhold for myself. How much self-interest is going to get me where I want to go, and how much outward collective interest is going to get me to go where I want to go, given this sort of social parameters. But you learn that barometer very young. And it's crazy. We learn this very young, and so we don't really realize we're doing it when we're getting older. But we're doing these base things so much when we get older and fitting into the social world. And it's because as people, we come sort of equipped with a cultural center in our brain, and we just know how to be agents. Like, anyways, I don't really know why it's like that. But that's one thing we do. And then, so you need to learn how to map the cultural structures onto you, and you need to learn how to share in a sense. And you can even learn how to share in a manipulative, Machiavellian way through playing T, and you can share and learn how to share through an Erasmian way of playing T. But it's like, even if you want to be the best criminal you can be, you need to play some dang Tea Party, or at least to play, like, learn how to play it in a way where people don't know you're shysting them. I mean, whatever. But that's just, even the roles that you want to take on later on in life, kids, they're going to learn it primarily through playing. It's like the sort of micro elements of what it is that actually get us through cultural and social situations are really pertinent, and they're taught to kids, and kids learn them and practice with them through playing. Now to the roughhousing, and this is a thing too I noticed with most kids. Okay, so it's maybe because I'm from I don't think maybe, I know it's because I'm from the ghetto in real ways, and I know that you can't go around, and at least I was taught at an early age, you can't just mess with anybody or anything in the environment. You need to have a necessary fear and distance and proper appreciation for your abilities per se, or just your physical makeup and its prowess. You need to have a proper respect for it. And I think people naturally have this in some respects because we are mammals, but I think actually using it and manipulating it into some respects is taught to us through roughhousing and that type of play. I think it's even where people learn to be empathic. You learn to be empathic through Tea Party, and I think you learn to be empathic through roughhousing, because at least if there is like the right sort of governing figures in it, if the kids aren't too maladaptive, if it's not a total crapshoot as a home environment or whatever, kids are gonna learn you can win and you can be rough, but there is a degree in which you go too far. And how far is too far? Kids need to learn how far too far is. Athletes are actually good at knowing how far is too far. Most athletes. And then even in sports, it's like if the athlete's not good at knowing how far too far is, in professional sports, they don't last very long, or they get a very sour social reputation. Which social reputations, they matter to people. Guess what? Because they're social things. It's just that you even learn, okay, this is the strong guy, this is the weak guy. This is the strong girl, this is the weak girl. If I'm strong girl going against weak girl, how do I deal with weak girl? If I'm weak girl going against strong girl, how do I deal with strong girl? And you actually get clever in dealing with bigger, strong person, and you have different things like jiu-jitsu and judo and karate and different things like that emerge in some respects in the human psyche from doing this dynamic of roughhousing and doing this dynamic of play. But it's also where I think where kids learn humility and a proper self-image. Because if you have asthma, you can't sit there, dang well you need to pace yourself in the basketball game. You can't go Dirk Nowitzki and just Derrick Rose on them all the time. If you can do it, you got to do it in a measured way. It's just like you have to take your limitations into considerations. I mean, you just have to deal with who you are in a social setting with demands needing to be met in a very non-consequential way. Because it's not like, but you don't know that when you're a kid. Kids don't know that. There's like a tremendous amount of consequence riding on it. Their reputation and their social standing is riding on it. They don't know. They'll never see those kids again for the rest of their lives. But it's just to say that play, it's so necessary. But I guess the reason I bring the scientific standpoint and just at least the psychological standpoint and saying all these things, communicating all these things, because there is something seriously wrong in our legislation in the way that we're doing school. It's like it's the polar introverted intuition in me that only makes It only gives me just the horrific doomsday visions and insights that it gives me. But man, if you want to know how we're gonna just totally dehumanize our culture, one of the big aspects is by taking out play. Play is fundamental to our development as individuals, and being able to be creative, egalitarian, and intelligent in some respects. Yeah, you gotta play games. I mean, you have to play games, even if they're board games, because even to be strategic, you have to learn how you actually have to get into the space of outthinking another person and outthinking another person within the rules and in a socially acceptable manner to where you can win, but win without just completely destroying the dominance hierarchy around you. You don't want to destroy the dominance hierarchy around you because it's a giant game. If the game stops, so part of the reason why I can't agree with certain nihilistic philosophies like MGTOW and things like that, but if the game just suddenly stops existing and it totally implodes on itself, there's a lot of freaking problems, and that's what, I swear that's the future we're approaching at a very swift, beatneck pace. We need to freaking chill out in some respects, and excuse me in getting passionate, but it's just say that play is necessary. It's more important. So play is necessary in a child's development. It's more important than we first, I think that we give first glance to. It's not just a means of kids getting energy out because they can't sit still, or we have an increase in ADHD or in something, and that's another form of medication, which is how I hear a lot of people talk about playing in schools. And it's not that play is necessary specifically just for their physical health, or the obesity tag that's always linked to the lack of play in schools, which I don't think it's necessarily a lack of physical activity leads to obesity in America per se, but I think there's a lot of psychological reasons that there's obesity in America, but that's not what I'm talking about. But it's that play, it fundamentally creates the fundamental structures for empathy, for at least strategic thinking, for socially acceptable competitive behaviors, and just a whole slew of other things. Humility, even in a lot of respects and places. Self-image. It's just those things, it can go wrong, but it's just that all these things, they get constructed, and even for how we are going to fit ourselves in a dominance hierarchy, we get roles. We don't get the best roles from other kids. But school is where kids go to learn from one another. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Nobody, at least the social game, the ethical and the moral landscape, we learn it from each other. We just do. But that's what's happening. It's like you learn the role, man. You get like people. Man, I have been intelligent, disruptive, and quiet and creative. Like, that has been the tags. Those have been the things that have been following me for all of my life. And it was my peers taught it to me. Also, iconoclastic. It's like the iconoclastic. Man, that was little Joshua in elementary school, or who his peers made him out to be. Sort of the role that was admitted to me in some respects that I accepted, and I chose to play. I was like, I can wear this hat. But anyways, so it's just really it's on play and per se that at least just reconsider in our legislation what we're doing about kids and their ability to play. And it seems that play and recess is necessary all the way through high school. You just need it. It's important for an individual's psychological and social development. So that's the video on play, and hopefully you found it interesting and insightful.